It's no secret that the name Zack Snyder has become a bit infamous due to some of the narrative choices he's made in some of his DCEU films, and fairly so. Despite all that, however, I've always still maintained the belief that Zack Snyder is one of the most visually talented directors working today. More precisely, aside from maybe the likes of Guy Ritchie, he might very well be the most talented at one specific type of visual filmmaking: filming style. And what better example of this than the movie that first made him famous, 300. To be honest, this film is so narratively simplistic and one-dimensional that by logic it should not be good at all. Basically, the whole plot is that a bunch of buff dudes with 6-packs and 8-packs march over to a narrow cliffside and then just stay there the entire time, battling horde after horde of nameless enemies. And yet, it's incredible. It's so visually stunning, so striking, overall so stylistic that you right away forget all about the lack of a deeply layered story and just get pulled into what you're seeing. Like, if there is such a thing as cinematography prawn, this movie would be it. And the question this obviously brings up is, how does Snyder pull that off? What exactly does he do in order to make this movie so visually impressive and stylistic that it so effectively captivates the human eye? What super secret magical visual filmmaking methods and techniques does he use? The short answer is, well, just watch the movie and you'll see. Oh, he uses slow motion. Oh, he shoots visuals in an indirect, unexpected way. Oh, he relies on strong, exaggerated colors. Oh, he utilizes focus and blur. That, in a nutshell, is what Snyder does. But what I'm more interested in is how does he do it? In what ways does he use these techniques? What does he achieve by using them? And so, let's try to figure that out. Let's march over to the mostly shirtless world of 300 in order to answer the question of how can you, in a proper way, visually spice up any movie that needs spicing up. How exactly do you film style? Considering the topic we're here for, I might as well begin with the visual technique that probably is the biggest legacy this movie left behind: slow motion. And before I go any further, yes, it can look very cool. But even though slow motion can look cool, that alone isn't really a reason enough to use it. Because what very easily happens is that it becomes overused, which I think is kinda the case with this movie. I mean, 300 uses slow motion so much that it might be the only 90-minute movie in history that's 2 hours long. Maybe it gets away with it because of the source material and because it was 2006, but no, I wouldn't use slow motion just for the sake of using slow motion. The lesson you should take from this movie though is the excellent way it uses slow motion to boost the impact that it wants its most important moments to have on the audience. For example, look at the now legendary pit moment.
Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger. This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
The reason I believe the slow motion works so well here is because of the sheer sense of power it creates. Leading up to this moment, the messenger has been established to be this super confident representative of Xerxes who cannot be touched because of who he is. And despite that, Leonidas chooses to just kick him down a hole. Yes, shooting this in slow-mo obviously does make it look cooler, but it also highlights the significance of Leonidas' choice. It makes the choice seem more important. It gives the choice weight. It shows the audience just how far Leonidas is willing to go to protect his home. And without the slow-mo, I don't think it would carry the same impact.
Madness. This is Sparta!
Same with all other similar situations. The hunchback's decision to denounce Leonidas, the tragedy of the captain's son dying, the dread of the beast that Leonidas has to face off with, the ending effort of throwing the spear at Xerxes. Whenever there's a big moment in this film, I guarantee you it slows time down to make it seem even bigger. But just because you can argue that this movie is almost always slowed down, I'll also give one quick outside example as well, from the movie Heat. This is a film that on purpose was made much less flamboyant flamboyantly stylistic and thus almost completely without standout visual techniques like slow motion. But when we get to one of the most crucial character moments in the story where Robert De Niro makes the choice to start killing even though that's not the person he wants to be, just guess what happens. Whenever you have a moment that you want the audience to notice, a choice or an emotion or whatever, you can utilize slow motion to boost the power and significance it carries. But at the same time, keep in mind, the more slow motion shots you use, the less of an impact each one is going to make. The second stylistic lesson you can learn from 300 is the method of shooting visuals in an indirect and incomplete way that the audience isn't expecting. Basically, what I mean is that even though every movie should always find a way to establish all significant information visually, that doesn't mean you always have to show the audience everything. Sometimes you can deliver that significant information by showing only a fraction of it and letting the audience then fill in the rest. Instead of showing young Leonidas plunge his spear into the wolf, the movie gives us a shadow version of it. Instead of right away fully revealing the deformed hunchback, the movie reveals just a glimpse of his deformed hand. Instead of showing the Spartans massacring the Persian horsemen forever, it encapsulates the main point of it with a few shots of bloody spears. Instead of showing the sorcerers getting sliced up, it shows us their bombs dropping to the ground. Not only do these indirect puzzle-like visuals make the audience more immersed in the experience, they can also lead to some very aesthetically impressive results. But if you want to be like 300 and take things to the next level, you can also plan shots with more of a metaphorical mindset. As in, you can feature visuals that don't necessarily belong based on what they are, but instead by what they represent. When the queen is meeting her trusted politician friend at night, the movie cuts to a shot showing only their shadows. By face value, the shot might seem a bit weird and out of place, but it still fits the scene like a glove, because it perfectly encapsulates the mood of their secret midnight meetup. When Leonidas decides to kneel to Xerxes, the movie on multiple occasions cuts away from him to his equipment hitting the ground. Great shots just by themselves, but what really makes them shine is how effectively they convey the hardship and heaviness of the decision. Look at the moment soon after, where you'll find one of my personal favorite shots of the movie.
His shield was heavy. It threw him off balance. And his target is far away.
To be fair, the ending section is full of amazing shots, but the shot that always stuck out to me was this one, where the spear reflects against the staircase. Not only because of what it is, but because of the meaning it carries. Thus far, Xerxes has always been built up to be this god in human form that no mortal can touch. And here we have this shot showing the spear climbing up the stairs to touch him. As in, the spear climbs up to the heavens to Xerxes' level and makes him bleed. Maybe I am being a bit of a hipster film YouTuber, but personally I always just saw this shot as nothing short of incredible. And shots like this are what you can find when you look for more indirect ways to convey information. However, there is one big warning to this method of visual filmmaking. Whatever you show, it has to feel like it belongs. Because if it doesn't, then we start to get stuff like in The Village, where you have these random incompatible shots that feel like they're there just because you had two different takes of something that you needed to cut away from in order to put them together.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the f*** is that? What is that?
The third aesthetic factor you can notice about 300 is in the colors. I've talked about using color in a more technical sense before, but here the topic is more about the overall appearance, meaning the thing that gives the world of this film such a stylistic look is the strong, exaggerated way it uses light and color. But before you run off to crank your film's vibrancy all the way up, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Firstly, this movie might get away with more because of the source material. Secondly, and more importantly, the exaggerated colors here aren't used just for the sake of using them, but because they also have a narrative and or thematic reason to be there. For example, look at the two connected scenes in the beginning.
Taught never to retreat, never to surrender, taught that death on the battlefield was the greatest glory.
When young Leonidas is being trained, the world is all grey and bleak. But then we cut to the next shot and it's all comfortably warm. This not only keeps the look of the movie intriguing and fresh, it also symbolizes what it means to be a Spartan. It's an identity full of tough, unforgiving training and war, but also an identity of compassion and care. In a similar manner, the movie organically ties color into the DNA of scenes and sequences throughout the entire runtime. Sometimes the color is less noticeable than other times, but usually it's there. It can be cold and dark, it can be dark and unsettling, it can be toxic, majestic, whatever mood or emotions the film wants to evoke, it finds a way to support that with the overall aesthetic appearance. I mean, just look at Sparta itself. Basically, there's only ever two main colors of light used to describe it. It's either very natural, which makes the place and its people feel more grounded and relatable, or it's overly sunny, which highlights the beauty of Sparta that Leonidas and his men are fighting for. In the ending Battle of Macbeth, the world isn't turned strong red just because it looks cool. I'm sure that's part of the reason, but it's not the reason. It also has a clear, powerful thematic basis, because here we have these two former friends turned enemies finally going at it in one last rage-filled clash. And so, whether you're making a more traditional, visually stunning film like Macbeth, or a more not-so-subtle, stylishly stunning film like 300, this is the mindset you should always keep. Don't just ask yourself what kind of lighting and color would make my scene look cool. Instead, first ask yourself what kind of lighting and color would best serve the purpose that my scene is trying to accomplish. The final stylistic filmmaking aspect I want to bring up is the very effective way this movie uses blur and focus. If you're not too aware of what I'm talking about, it's exactly what it sounds like. It basically means that there's a distance in your shot where everything's blurry and a distance where everything's in focus. And just by itself, this technique might be the quickest way of increasing the entertainment value of your frames, because honestly, it can look really impressive. I wouldn't say there exists any big, hugely significant downside to overusing focus, like there for example is with overusing slow motion. But I do want to point out that this movie once again doesn't use it just randomly only for the sake of using it, but with an actual purpose behind it. Obviously, the frames in 300 do have a lot going on in them. Most of this movie was shot with a blue screen background, so the artist could then fill that background with as much stuff as they wanted. And when you have a crap ton of stuff filling the screen, what easily ends up happening is that the audience gets lost and kind of emotionally disconnected, which is why Zack Snyder very often turns to focus to stop this from happening.
This is where we fight! This is where they die! And these shields, boys! Remember this day, man, for it will be yours for all time!
Leonidas psyching up his men as the massive Persian army converges on them in the background, that's a very big, very awesome shot. But in order for this shot to ever feel like more than just noise, our attention has to be fully on Leonidas. And so, instead of just cutting away from the approaching army, Snyder uses blur and focus to make us feel like we're right there in the moment with Leonidas. We get our big, awesome Persian army, but we also get the emotion. Because in essence, the more you blur out of a shot and the tighter you get, the more intimate and emotional the shot is going to feel. But it's not just about emotion either. It's also about letting the audience know what's important and just how important it is. When the beast approaches Leonidas with the blade, everything else is blurred out. Why? Because despite all the cool, hectic fighting going on in the peripheral, this shot mainly exists to tell the audience just one thing. Uh-oh, blade. The focus makes the shot look visually intriguing, but it also serves its own clear purpose, just like all the other similar blur focus shots throughout the movie.
You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death.
Moderate blur. It's Leonidas's choice, but his wife and people still factor into how he makes it. complete blur. Nothing else matters in this moment.
Anyway, maybe at this point I'm just stating the obvious, but I guess what I'm trying to say is this. Whereas others might get their kicks out of watching Girls and Cops, I personally get my kicks out of watching Zack Snyder rack focus. And when you take this focus technique and combine it with the other visual techniques we talked about, that's how you get a movie that captures people's eyes. That's how you film this.